Hey everyone, welcome back to Steve's View. Grab a coffee, get comfy, and let's talk about something that sounds super wonky but hits your wallet, your job, and honestly the way America does business with the world, tariffs. Specifically, the Trump-era tariff strategy, why it exists, what it's doing right now, what the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, says it could do to our federal deficit, and what that means for you and me. I'll keep this as down-to-earth and conversational as possible. No Econ 101 pop quizzes, just straight talk. By the end, you'll be able to explain this stuff to your friends without sounding like you swallowed a textbook. All right, big headline first. The CBO, think of them as the government's budget scorekeepers, put out a projection saying that if current tariff plans hold, the policy could shrink the U.S. federal deficit by something like $4 trillion over the next decade. $4 trillion. That number is so huge it barely feels real, like monopoly money. But it's not. The gist is simple. Tariff dollars pile up at the border when foreign-made goods enter the U.S. And if you collect enough of those dollars, you lower how much the government needs to borrow, which also trims interest costs. More revenue in, slightly less interest out, smaller deficit. That's the math in plain English. Let's zoom out for a second. For decades, America has been living on the national equivalent of a revolving credit card. We spend more than we take in. We borrow the difference. We promise to be good next year, and then next year we do it again. We get away with it partly because the US dollar is the world's main currency. Countries hold dollars, buy our treasury bonds, and park their savings in our financial system. But even with that advantage, there's a limit to what's healthy. You know that feeling when your credit card bill stops being a bill and starts being a lifestyle? That's kind of where Washington's been for a while. So when the budget referees say, hey, tariffs could actually help close the gap, people perk up. Now, tariffs are not new. The US used them aggressively in the early 20th century. We dialed them back when we built the modern trading system after World War II. But Trump treated tariffs like a wrench and a flashlight, tools you throw into your bag because you think you'll need them on the job. He used them in two ways: as leverage, follow our rules if you want our market, and as a direct cash register at the border. That's important. It means the policy isn't just about punishing someone else. It's also about collecting money while the negotiating game plays out. Why does that leverage work? Because the US consumer market is the big prize. It's the busiest store on the planet. If you're a country that wants to sell cars, electronics, clothing, food, whatever, you want to sell into America. Canada sends a huge slice of its exports here. Mexico too. Europe cares a lot. So does Asia. Everyone wants shelf space in the American store. That's the bargaining chip Washington is playing. We love that you want to sell here. Here are the terms. When the tariff push first rolled out, there was a ton of noise. China threatened countermeasures. The European Union promised to respond. Canada and Mexico sounded tough. Headlines went full trade war, and the internet did what the internet does. Panic. Dunk, repeat, but look at what actually happened over time. Some partners retaliated for a bit. Then, pretty quickly, most came back to the table. Why? Because walking away from the US market is like a pro team walking away from its best stadium. You can do it for a weekend, but not for a season. Canada is the cleanest case study. There was a back and forth over steel and aluminum. Ottawa put on retaliatory tariffs. Washington held its line. Supply chains got squeezed. It hurt. On both sides, to be fair, but the pain landed harder where reliance on the U.S. market was deepest. Before long, Canada shelved the retaliation and shifted to, okay, what deal keeps business moving? That flow, from shock to retaliation to negotiation to deal, is basically the template. The same rhythm showed up with others. Talk tough, feel the pinch, then hash it out. That's the political theater part. There's also the business reality part. Behind the scenes, companies don't wait around for speeches to end. They reroute supply chains. They move steps of production closer to the customer. They source from countries with better terms, or they bite the bullet and pay the duty. If you're a manufacturer deciding where to build your next plant, a tariff is like a road sign that says "Detour to America." It doesn't force you, but it nudges you. And when enough firms follow the same nudge, you start to see reshoring, moving production back to the US, and nearshoring, moving it to Mexico or Canada so it's still inside a North American trading zone. That matters for jobs, for tax revenue, and for the kind of industrial base a country has. Now, let's bring the CBO back into this, because their number is the headline everyone remembers. Imagine a faucet at the border. Every time an imported item comes through, a little bit of water flows into the Treasury's bucket in the form of a tariff payment. Multiply that by millions of items and thousands of categories, and the bucket fills up. The CBO basically says if the faucet stays open like this, and if Washington doesn't drill new holes in the bucket, you can collect enough water to make a real dent in the deficit. Add in the fact that borrowing slightly less can mean paying slightly less interest because you're not stacking as much new debt, and you get the multi-trillion-dollar figure over 10 years. It's powerful politics, too. You can stand in front of a chart and say, we're lowering the deficit and we're not cutting your Social Security or raising your income taxes. We're charging fees at the border to people who want access to our market. That sells. It resonates. It sounds like making the world chip in for America's bills. And whether you love that pitch or hate it, it's effective messaging. It turns a complicated macro policy into a pretty simple story. Pay the toll, use the road. But we have to be honest about trade-offs, because they always exist. Here are 3 big cautions I want front and center. First, tariffs can push up the price of imported goods, and a lot of what Americans buy has imported components. Even stuff made in America often uses imported parts. When prices rise, U.S. consumers end up paying more at checkout. That can dilute the budget benefits. Yes, Uncle Sam collects more at the border, but households may pay more at the store. It's not invisible, it's just indirect. Second, the CBO's projection sits on assumptions that current tariff levels stick around, that the global trade map doesn't twist in unexpected ways, and that future leaders don't undo the policy. If those assumptions change, the math changes. Models are only as sturdy as the guesses inside them. Third, 10-year forecasts in a democracy are optimistic. Elections happen. Priorities shift. Shocks hit. 10 years is 2 or 3 political lifetimes. The direction can be right, while the precision is fuzzy. Don't carve any of this in granite. With those caveats on the table, let's work through how this plays out for regular people, not just for budget nerds. Picture a family shopping at a big box store on a Saturday. They need school supplies, a set of tires, maybe a new microwave because the old one died. If tariffs are in place on steel, aluminum, electronics, or appliances, some of those items might cost a bit more. You won't see a line on the receipt labeled tariff, but you'll feel it in the total. Multiply that by a whole economy, and you get a gentle but noticeable drag on purchasing power. It's not apocalypse, but it's not nothing. Now, flip the camera. You run a mid-sized manufacturing company in the Midwest. You've been buying a component from overseas. Suddenly, it's 10% more because of a tariff. You do the math. Could you source from Mexico? Could you get a U.S. supplier to scale up? Could you redesign the part to use a different material? If yes, maybe you shift the order and keep the final price steady. If no, you split the difference, eat some margin, pass some costs to customers, and hope volumes don't drop. That's the quiet grind that happens under the headline numbers. What about jobs? If tariffs nudge production closer to home, that can mean more hiring in certain sectors. Machinery, autos, metal fabrication, construction materials, electronics assembly. Not every job comes back. Technology keeps replacing labor. And some things will always be cheaper to make elsewhere. But the map can change at the edges, and those edges add up in specific regions. That's part of the bet here, that the revenue you collect, plus the jobs you pull closer, plus the bargaining power you gain, outweigh the higher prices and the friction you introduce. Where do trade deals fit? This is the sneaky part a lot of people miss. Tariffs aren't meant to sit on forever at the same levels for every partner. They're leverage. If a country cuts a deal, stricter rules of origin, fewer subsidies, better access for U.S. exports, some tariffs can come down for that partner. Yes, that can reduce tariff revenue from that one lane. But if the deal unlocks more U.S. sales into their market or triggers more investment here, you make back money in other taxes: payroll, corporate, income, sales. In plain English, the border toll is a bridge to a better traffic pattern, not the end state. Let's talk North America, because it's the most intertwined example. A car seat gets stitched in Mexico. Foam is cut in the U.S. The harness comes from Canada. Assembly is in Ohio. Then the finished SUV is sold in Texas. Tariffs on one piece of that chain can ripple down the line. Short term, that's pain. Medium term, it's pressure to do more steps inside the tariff wall so you're not paying the toll each time a component crosses a border. That's why you see automakers tweak their sourcing and why you see suppliers open plants inside North America rather than offshore. It's not about patriotism. It's about math under new rules. So what do I actually think will happen? Short run, say the next 3 to 5 years. The tariff strategy likely keeps pulling in real money. The U.S. market remains the world's big customer, and that leverage doesn't evaporate overnight. The CBO's deficit reduction headline captures that this isn't imaginary revenue. It's cash that actually shows up. Meanwhile, we'll keep seeing the cycle. The U.S. pushes, partners bristle. Both sides count costs. Then they sketch a compromise that narrows the gap. Rinse, repeat. Beyond that 5-year window, the fog thickens. Will the next administration keep the wall as wide? Will Congress change lanes? Will partners coordinate new ways around the toll booths? Will new tech, AI chips, advanced batteries, critical minerals shift where the pressure is? Those unknowns are exactly why I flagged the tunnel vision risk of a 10-year forecast. It can be useful to set direction, but nobody should treat it as a promise. Let's bring this back to earth with some everyday examples you might actually feel. Electronics. Lots of gadgets depend on parts made in Asia. If tariffs touch those categories, prices can inch up or brands quietly swap components. Sometimes you'll see a special U.S. edition with slightly different specs. That's supply chain gymnastics to hit a price point under new rules. Groceries and household goods. Packaging and equipment matter. If aluminum costs a bit more, beverage companies think about it. If steel kitchenware sees a tariff, you might notice your favorite brand rolling out a value line. It's not always obvious, but it's there. Cars and car parts. Even if your vehicle is assembled in the U.S., the parts supply tree is global. Tariffs on metal or specific components can show up as a slightly higher sticker price or fewer dealer incentives. On the flip side, if more parts are sourced domestically, that can buoy local jobs. Home improvement, appliances, tools, materials, tariffs can nudge these prices around the edges. Contractors feel that first, then homeowners. None of this is a doomsday story. It's trade-offs. The government collects money at the border. You might pay a touch more in certain aisles. Some jobs come closer. Some supply chains shift. Partners make deals. The deficit looks a little less ugly on the chart. Whether you net out as a winner or loser depends on who you are. Consumer, worker, business owner, exporter, importer. Most of us are a mix of all those roles over time. One more point on politics, because it's a huge part of this. Tariffs let a president say, "I'm making other countries pay." That's clean. That's powerful. it's also not the whole truth. Foreign producers cut checks at the border, yes, but companies can pass costs along to consumers. So part of the bill lands with us. That doesn't invalidate the policy. It just means the real story is more complicated than a slogan on a hat. The honest way to frame it is, we're charging for access to our market. Some of that money helps America's budget. Some of the cost shows up in what we pay. We're trading a bit of price pressure for more leverage, some reshoring, and potentially a better long-run position. Where does that leave the CBO's eye-popping number? I treat it like a weather forecast for a long road trip. It tells you the likely conditions, not the exact minute it'll rain on exit 214. Directionally helpful, not destiny. If tariff policy stays broadly in place, you keep collecting. If deals trim certain lanes, you collect less at the border, but maybe more in other taxes as activity shifts. If politics flips, the forecast flips with it. Okay, time to land the plane. Here's my simple, human-level bottom line. In the near term, tariffs are a real, working revenue stream. They also give the U.S. a strong negotiating stick because everyone wants in on the American market. The benefits are balanced by costs you can feel. Imported stuff can get pricier, and some of that cost ends up on U.S. shoppers. The CBO's big savings number is meaningful, but it rests on assumptions that may or may not hold. And 10-year projections, useful directionally, shaky precisely. As partners cut deals, certain tariffs will likely ease for them. That can lower tariff revenue from those lanes, but if the deals spur more U.S. production and exports, the tax base grows in other ways. Over time, expect a map with fewer blanket tariffs and more targeted arrangements, sector by sector, partner by partner, built around the same core idea. Access to the American consumer is valuable, and it comes with terms. All right, I promised a clear start and a clear finish, so here's the clean ending. TLDR for your brain. Tariffs are a toll booth on the road into America's market. The toll collects real money that can shrink the deficit. That leverage pulls some production closer and pushes partners to deal. But the toll can also raise prices for us at home. And the forecast depends on politics staying consistent, which it rarely does for 10 straight years. Smart tool? In the short run, yeah. Silver bullet? No. Think of it as a strong play in a longer game where we still have to tackle spending, tax design, and the deeper structural stuff that actually decides whether the American economy stays competitive and fair. If you made it this far, you're a legend. Tell me what you think in the comments. Are tariffs a fair way to make global sellers pay to play, or are they just a backdoor tax that we all end up paying at checkout? Where have you personally felt it? Cars, groceries, gadgets? I read the comments, and I'm curious what's showing up in your world. If this helped, hit like so YouTube knows it, subscribe for more deep dives made human, and share this with a friend who keeps asking why prices look different lately. Thanks for hanging out. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.